Right now, somewhere in the United States, there is a house where something terrifying has already happened. But nobody knows it yet. The lights might still be on, the TV might still be playing, maybe there's a phone vibrating on a kitchen counter, but the person who lives there is already dead. And the most disturbing part is that it could take days, weeks, sometimes even months before anyone discovers what happened inside. Because when someone dies alone in their own house, the world outside doesn't stop, it doesn't slow down, and it definitely doesn't notice right away. Imagine this for a second. You live alone, just like millions of other people. It's a completely normal evening. Maybe you just got home from work. Maybe you're heating up leftovers. Maybe you're scrolling through your phone while a show plays quietly in the background. Nothing feels unusual. Nothing feels dangerous. And then suddenly, something happens. It could be a heart attack, a stroke, a sudden fall, or even something as simple as slipping in the bathroom. Within seconds, everything changes. The TV keeps playing, the clock keeps ticking, the lights stay on, but you're gone. And outside your house, life continues exactly the same. Cars pass by your street, your neighbors walk their dogs, someone down the block is laughing with friends, and absolutely nobody realizes that behind one closed door, a life has just ended. And here's the part that makes this situation so unsettling. This scenario happens far more often than most people think, especially in modern cities where millions of adults live alone. In fact, every year, there are thousands of cases where someone dies in their own home and isn't discovered for days or even weeks. And when that happens, something very strange begins. Because inside the house, time almost feels frozen. A half-finished cup of coffee might still be sitting on the table. A phone might still be buzzing with notifications. Maybe a text message arrives asking, "Hey, are you coming tomorrow?" But nobody ever replies. Hours pass. Then a full day goes by. And inside the body itself, a silent process has already started. Within minutes of death, the heart stops pumping blood and oxygen stops reaching the body's cells. The muscles relax completely, which is why people often collapse exactly where they were standing. Then something scientists call rigor mortis begins, where the body slowly cools down until it matches the temperature of the room around it. At the same time, gravity begins pulling the remaining blood toward the lowest parts of the body, creating dark purple patches on the skin in a process known as rigor mortis. And all of this is happening quietly inside the house, completely unnoticed by the outside world. Meanwhile, the person's phone might still be lighting up every few minutes. Maybe a coworker sends a message asking where they are. Maybe a friend tries calling. The phone rings, and rings, and rings, until eventually the calls stop. Outside, the next morning arrives like any other day. The sun rises, neighbors leave for work, delivery drivers pass by the house without thinking twice. And inside, the next stage has already begun. Because once the body stops receiving oxygen, the bacteria that normally live inside the digestive system begin breaking down tissues from the inside out. This is the true beginning of decomposition. Gases slowly start forming inside the body, and over time, those gases begin to build up. Meanwhile, everyday life outside the house keeps moving forward. The mailbox slowly fills with letters and bills. Packages get delivered and remain untouched on the porch. Maybe the trash bins stay outside longer than usual. These are the first small clues that something might be wrong. But here's the disturbing truth. If the person lived a very isolated life, those clues might not be noticed for a long time. Because the biggest factor in how quickly someone is discovered after dying alone is something surprisingly simple: human connection. If someone has co-workers expecting them at work, family members who check in regularly, or friends who call often, someone might notice within a day or two that something isn't right. But if the person mostly kept to themselves, worked remotely, and rarely interacted with neighbors, days can turn into weeks before anyone realizes something has happened. And during that time, the next stage of decomposition begins. Gases continue building inside the body, causing it to swell slightly, and then something else begins to appear: a smell. At first it's faint, barely noticeable, but over time it becomes stronger and stronger. A very specific odor that people who work in forensic science instantly recognize: the smell of decomposition. But early on, that smell usually stays trapped inside the house, especially if the windows and doors are closed, meaning the outside world still might not notice anything unusual. Meanwhile, the house itself slowly becomes a strange snapshot of someone's final moment. The last meal they prepared might still be sitting on the kitchen counter. A TV remote might still be resting where they dropped it. Maybe the shower was still running. Everyday life paused forever in the middle of a routine that would never continue. But eventually, something almost always breaks the silence. Maybe a coworker reports them missing after several days. Maybe a concerned relative calls the police asking them to check on the house. Maybe a neighbor finally notices a strange smell drifting through the hallway. And that's usually when authorities perform what's known as a welfare check. Police officers arrive at the house, knock on the door, announce themselves, and wait for a response. But when nobody answers, the situation suddenly becomes much more serious. Because now the question isn't just, are they home? No, it's what happened inside. And if the officers have enough reason to believe something is wrong, they can legally enter the house. And when that door finally opens, that's when the real story begins. Because what they find inside depends entirely on how much time has passed since the person died. And sometimes the discovery is far more disturbing than anyone expected. By the time authorities finally step inside the house, hours, days, or sometimes even weeks may have passed since the moment the person died, and what they encounter inside can feel deeply unsettling because the house often looks almost completely normal at first glance. The furniture is still neatly arranged. The curtains hang exactly where they always did. Maybe a lamp is still glowing softly in the corner of the room. Maybe the television is still quietly playing to an empty space. And yet somewhere inside that house, time has clearly moved forward in a way nobody wanted to imagine. Because if several days have passed, the body has already entered what forensic scientists call the stage of active decomposition, a point where natural bacteria inside the body rapidly break down tissues, producing gases and fluids as the body slowly returns to the environment around it. This is when swelling becomes more noticeable and the smell becomes far stronger, a very distinct odor that can slowly spread through carpets, furniture, air vents, and even small cracks around doors or walls. And this is usually when neighbors later say something like, "We thought something smelled strange, but we didn't know what it was," because the human mind rarely jumps straight to the conclusion that someone nearby may have died. But once police confirm what has happened, the quiet house suddenly becomes the center of a careful and methodical investigation. Officers begin documenting everything inside, taking photographs, examining the environment, and determining whether there are any signs of foul play. In most cases, there aren't, and the death is eventually ruled natural or accidental. But until that is confirmed, every detail matters. Eventually, the situation is handed over to the local medical examiner or coroner, whose job is to officially determine the cause of death. Sometimes that requires a full autopsy, especially if the circumstances are unclear, while other times medical history and evidence from the scene are enough to reach a conclusion. But while that process is happening, another quiet part of the story begins unfolding outside the house. Because someone has to be notified. Family members, distant relatives, or sometimes people who haven't spoken to the person in years suddenly receive a phone call telling them that someone they once knew has died alone in their home. And for many people, that moment is deeply emotional, not just because of the loss itself, but because of the realization that the person spent their final moments with nobody around. Meanwhile, the house itself now faces a completely different problem. Because when a body remains in one place for an extended period of time, the surrounding environment can become contaminated. Fluids released during decomposition can seep into carpets, mattresses, and even wooden floorboards. Bacteria spreads through porous materials, and depending on how long the body remained undiscovered, insects may appear as part of nature's own cleanup process. This is why scenes like this cannot simply be cleaned by ordinary house cleaning services. Instead, specialized biohazard cleanup teams are called in, professionals trained to handle environments where biological contamination is present. When these teams arrive, they often wear protective suits, gloves, masks, and respirators while they carefully remove contaminated materials from the home. In some cases, carpets have to be cut out and discarded entirely, Sections of flooring may need to be removed, and furniture that absorbed fluids or odors is often thrown away because it cannot be safely restored. Every surface is then disinfected using powerful chemical cleaners designed to eliminate dangerous pathogens and lingering biological residue. The entire process can take many hours or even several days, depending on how severe the contamination has become. And even after everything has been cleaned and restored, the house itself often carries a strange emotional weight for the people who know what happened there. Neighbors may quietly talk about the story for months, sometimes years. People passing by might glance at the windows and remember the strange day when police cars were parked outside. And yet, the most unsettling part of these situations is how quietly they begin. Because when someone dies alone, the world outside doesn't stop to notice. Traffic still moves through the streets, children still walk to school, delivery drivers still drop packages at the door, and life continues exactly the same for everyone else. Yet behind one door, everything has permanently stopped. And cases like this are becoming more common in modern society than many people realize. Today, more adults than ever before live by themselves. They work from home, communicate mostly through phones and computers, and sometimes go days without seeing another person face to face. Which means if something sudden happens, there may be nobody nearby to notice right away. And in many real cases, people are not discovered because of dramatic clues, but because of the smallest changes in routine. A coworker noticing someone never logged in to work that morning. A friend realizing their messages haven't been answered for several days. A neighbor seeing mail piling up in the mailbox, or a delivery package sitting untouched on the porch for far too long. These tiny details slowly form a picture that something might be wrong. And eventually, someone decides to check. And that simple decision can be the difference between someone being discovered within hours or remaining hidden for weeks. Because in the end, the story of someone dying alone in their house isn't really about the science of decomposition or the investigation that follows. It's about something far more human: connection. The truth is that the biggest protection people have against disappearing unnoticed is not technology, not alarms, not locked doors. It's other people. Friends who send messages, co-workers who notice absences, neighbors who care enough to knock on the door when something feels unusual. Those small connections act like invisible safety nets in our lives, and without them, even the most ordinary home on the quietest street can become a place where someone's final moments pass silently, unnoticed by the outside world. Which is why the next time you think about the people around you, the friend you haven't heard from in a while, the neighbor who always keeps to themselves, or the coworker who suddenly goes quiet, it might be worth sending a simple message or making a quick call, because sometimes the difference between someone being forgotten and someone being remembered begins with one small question. Hey, are you okay?